We're going to get started. We'll have our Q&A time here in just a moment as you're making your way back to your seats. All right. I wanted to just say a word that the Pauley's brought some resources with them from their son Scott, and these are just donation only. I think that we have both of these books. Scott wrote a book on Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph. Some of you already have that. There's a workbook, a companion resource that goes with it. Those are on the back table. Again, just donation. If you want to pick those up, you could just write a check and mark it on the envelope, and we'll make sure that gets where it needs to go. And then there's another one on revival praying, which would be a great blessing to you, and it has a workbook as well. So both of those would be valuable helps. Not so much with marriage. There's another resource they'll mention about that a little bit later, but we hope that those would be a help to you. Okay, so we're going to invite you to come. We're going to have Pastor Pauley and Mrs. Pauley just sit, and we'll give them a microphone. And if you have a question related to maybe a life stage or something that's already been touched on, that was a great lesson on communication and so much to think about there. So maybe it ties in with that, just a follow-up from last session or even yesterday, anything that you have for them. So I'm going to pass the mic off here and just get their attention, ask your question, and then we'll hopefully get some great answers here. Thanks.
All right. Who's first, I guess, right?
I'll go ahead.
Okay.
My wife and I are about to enter the stage of empty nester. Our daughter graduates this coming spring. What advice do you have as you transition to a new stage like that?
Wow.
We've had kids for 21 years, and now it's like we're starting over.
Well, I'll tell you, there's life after empty nesters. As empty nesters, there's no question about it. And we found ourselves staying just as busy with the children gone. Of course, it transitions, with them going to college first. And so you kind of get used to that. So you've gone through that stage, right, of college. And there's 4 years difference between Scott and Stacy. And so ironically, he was on staff at Crown College by that time when she went. And she really struggled. I'll just insert this. And she said, I hope I don't have Scott for a professor. But she said, if I do, I'm going to call him Dr. Poo-Poo Head. And, but.
She had him for a 7:30 a.m. class.
And he knew he was in trouble when Stacy was in the room. But at any rate, we kind of like each other, and after they were gone, we just found ourselves staying busy and traveling. Of course, by the time they were in college, I was at the church full time, leaving the workplace, and Marcia was on staff at the church as well as office administrator, and we just stayed really busy at the church, a growing church, and we just thank the Lord for it. And then the time that we could have with the kids, we would take as much time to go to school, down to the school when we could, special meetings and things like that. So Marcia may add a little more to that, and maybe something that I missed, but it was a great transition. I felt when Scott first left that, I moped around for a while, and Marcia will tell you, because I felt like I lost my best friend. And I'd answered a call to preach at 33, and then Scott answered a call to preach at 13. And so before he went to Bible college, he was already preaching. And he and I were having great conversations and enjoying life. And then he went off to school, but praise the Lord. We never thought that both of our children would end up moving back to Beckley. We thought once they got to college and married that they would be wherever. And Scott lived in Knoxville for a good while when staff there, but then left and became a full-time evangelist. And so they moved back. And so both of our children live on the farm. Her dad had an 80-acre farm, and we inherited the place. We had built there when he was still alive, and so the children live out on the farm and with us. And so it's just been a real blessing, a blessing of the Lord that they were our neighbors as well.
Okay, let me clarify. Are your children? Are your is your daughter finishing high school or college? High school, so she's headed to college. So, well, one thing that I found helpful was to close her bedroom door. That helped me. Day by day, walking down that hallway, it was tough. And it is. I mean, it is tough. But I think, and we often say it, but we don't often do it in our own lives. We tell people, your children, and I said it last night to the ladies, your children will grow up and leave, but your husband is there for a lifetime till death do you part. And so if we're not careful, we get so caught up in our children's life and I've seen a lot of parents that have a lot of mamas, let me say it this way, a lot of mamas who have tried to live their life over in their children. And because they felt like they missed out on something or they wanted to relive. So, I often caution, and we had to take heed to that as well, to not lose sight of each other during that transition. Your focus is still your children. Once you're a parent, you're always a parent. It matters not how old they get, they're always your kids. It's really funny now because at this stage in life, now our kids are saying, calling, leaving messages if we don't answer. Do you know where your parents are? We don't know where our parents are. So, it flip flops after a while. But during the transition, that helped us just to focus on each other. Remember what attracted you to each other and do things that you two enjoy. I mean, you're not having to watch out for your daughter's daily needs, and that helped us and close that bedroom door. That's the best advice I can give.
That's good.
I have two. One, what is something that you two really enjoy doing together? And is there a favorite meal that one of you cook for one another or that you like to go out to eat?
Very good. I'll let you go first.
Well, my husband is the griller. I do the indoor cooking. He does the outdoor cooking. So I don't do well at grilling.
She likes it when I grill. That's what she's
But
So we grill out a lot.
we grill out a lot. It makes the indoor when the meat is on the grill or the veggies or whatever, it makes the rest of the meal a lot easier. So probably one of our favorite meals that we have enjoyed since we were dating. My mom, always growing up, I lived on the farm, and Friday nights, mom always made homemade pizza, and so I took over that, learning to do that from my mom. And so when our kids came along, that's what we did. Friday night was family night, and I'd make homemade pizza. And whether we went to the family room and watched Andy Griffith or we played a board game or whatever we did as a family, that was a special time. And so we still enjoy, we eat out a lot, which is probably not healthy. It's sometimes that's one thing that I had to learn was when our children left home, especially our son, he was the first one to leave home. I had to learn to cook for a smaller group because my eater was gone. So
Glad you said that.
he's a small eater compared to Scott, what he was. So anyway, but we love home. We enjoy home. We really do. Always have. And we try to make our home happy with our children in it, to just them to enjoy being home. And they still love to come home, and we're thankful for that.
Can we add to that?
Neil, do you want to add?
Well, we do eat out a lot, but even when the kids were there with the busy schedule, sometimes it was easier. Marcia volunteered at the church, and they had never had a full-time pastor when we went to Cranberry, and it was amazing. We went through a building program, and I was full-time, left the company, we went full-time. She was full-time. And so our days were pretty busy with church, but then we would always take a day off from church if we could. Pardon me, unless there was a funeral or hospitals or things like that, we would try to have a designated day that we took off. I guess you guys do that. And it's good to do that. You have a lovely pastor and his wife, and as you take care of it, that's part of it. They need to have that family time and just downtime. But it's hard for a pastor to dismiss all that's going on. Troubled homes, runaway children or drug children or parents not doing well or death in the home or sickness. And it's hard to dismiss that when you're at home. And sometimes, though, you just need to get away. Someone said to me a long time ago, if you don't take time to come apart, you will come apart. And so it's important that you dismiss the work schedules that you're in, the household chores, and oh, thank you. And then the children, all that's going on. Thank you so much. So I think we answered that. There may be more to that, but the Lord's been good to us and given us good health. And even after the pastorate, we didn't realize what was going to happen. But it's been very busy, and the Lord's been good to us, and we thank the Lord for it.
Mentioned yesterday is counting the cost, which I've always found is one of the most valuable things to think about, so as to keep you out of trouble. And it often will come up with major things, but how do you keep that in the front of your mind always throughout the day or through all situations?
That's a very good question on counting the cost. When we first got married, our verse was and still is, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you, Matthew 6:33. And so understanding that many things that you want to do and there's nothing wrong with doing as a Christian, it may not be the will of God. And it's about trusting the Lord and asking God to give guidance in every decision that we make. That's from buying a car or remodeling the house or just everyday decisions that you're making to make sure, again, that you're making the decisions that's going to bring honor to the Lord, especially purchases. You know, it's easy to get caught up in that, and the Lord has helped us with that on making some decisions. And so I think you have to take that time, though, to be with each other. We always took vacations with the family. And ironically, even though the children are married and we have 6 grandchildren and now a great-grandchild, when we schedule vacation, they're all calling, where my mom and papa going on vacation this year? We want to go with you. And we love that. It's just been really good. And most of the time, of course, we like being together, and by ourselves every now and then we just sneak off and don't tell them, But anyway. Did I answer your question? Okay, good.
And I think something that God has taught me is there's a vast difference between a need and a want, and we have to decide what is best for our family, for us as husband and wife. And if we're not careful, we get caught up with what the Joneses have that live next door, So we have to be careful that there's a cost in everything. So, what's our main focus for us as a couple or as a family?
Yes, sir.
So the role of a husband and a wife at home is very significant, but there's lots to be done in God's church. How do you balance those two things?
We need to be reminded that marriage was God's idea from the very beginning, and that God put us together. And when we were married, I was in sales, door-to-door sales, and then went to the home office, which was there in Beckley, and for 20 years at the office. And so we were out of town a lot, traveling for the company. And then right in the middle of that, God called me to preach. And so anywhere my dad had preached back in the 40s and the 50s and 60s, then they wanted Preacher Pauley's boy to come up these hollers, and we would go preach everywhere in West Virginia. And so balancing the schedule is what you're talking about family time, work time, ministry time. And we combined them, truthfully. Am I right? We really combined them where the kids enjoyed going up these hollers. They enjoyed going to these churches, and we'd always make it fun. We're after church, we're going to stop by Dairy Queen, or we're going to eat before, or whatever. And so whatever we were doing, we tried to involve the kids. We tried to schedule time off, even at the church. I had a scheduled day off, and that time was to be mine. However, that didn't mean I wasn't on call as a preacher. You're always on call. If somebody's sick or there's a tragedy, a death, or whatever, then you're there. And so there's been many times that family schedules have been interrupted, but the kids always understood, and we tried to never be negative about it and not to fuss about it, just to say, well, these folks have a need, and we'll do something special when we get back. And so we tried to always include the kids, plan out vacations. Ironically, Scott's going on 49, Stacy's 45, and to this day, they still want to know, where Mom and Dad going on vacation? We all want to go. So we go as a family, all the grandchildren and great-grandbaby now. We go all on vacation once a year, one time a year, and so we schedule that. But you have to schedule. You have to schedule that time off, away from ministry, away from work. And of course, in my case, beginning, it was ministry and work. And there was a big demand that was there. But again, if you don't take time to come apart, you will come apart. And so it's about scheduling that time off to be alone or vacation or whatever.
And I think as mamas, as wives and mamas, we play a role in that because, we're the heart of the home, and we set the way it feels in the home. And if we're going to be negative, well, here we go again. There have been times that we had to leave for vacation late. And there's times that we had to come home early because there was a death, But our kids never, those of you that still have children at home, you use each of those times for a teaching time for them and a training time that, it's not all just about us, but we have to look at others. And that helps them as they grow. It helps them as they enter adulthood and find that mate for themselves. That helps them, I think, as well. But I think as wives, we need to encourage our husbands. When the schedule has to change, then what's my attitude about it? Am I upset, or am I saying we just do what we need to do? So.
If I may add one more thing, and while she was talking, it dawned on me. Was you finished? Okay. About the deacon that really came up against me because of our personal life, of just telling me about taking Friday off. That was family day. And so I took every Friday off, took no meetings on Fridays, no meetings at all on Fridays. And because the kids were bringing the kids up. And he said to me one day privately, and he was kind about it. He said, the only one thing that I'm really concerned about is that you don't take meetings. You will not take meetings on Friday night. And he said, I just think if you're in ministry that you make, I said, the greatest ministry I have is my kids. And so that's family night. And we treat it as family night. Now, it didn't mean that we didn't take some meetings or have a revival or whatever. But Friday nights, Back when I was working for the company, Friday nights was family night, and we're going to do something special. And that generally would go out and maybe play putt-putt or go eat pizza or whatever. But you need that time with the family. And God has given us two wonderful children, and we thank the Lord for it. And if I had it to do over, I would take another night, because we miss them, even though they live right there on the farm. Life changes quickly, and then when they have a family, and I think the kids caught that family is the most important thing that I have. I'm responsible as a dad, as a husband to my wife. Ministry, that's a calling upon our life that God has given us, but we were always involved in church, buses, and Sunday school, and soul winning, and all of that. But we went to another level when we answered call to preach, and you are on call a lot. And if someone's at the hospital and there's a funeral, naturally a death, whatever, then naturally that night had to be substituted a little bit. But for the most part, we took Friday nights.
He grew up as a preacher's kid, as a PK. I didn't. I mean, I grew up in a Christian home. I was carried to church from the time I was an infant, and I was saved when I was 8 years old. But so when we first got married, the first 11 years before God called him to preach, then we were just lay people in the church, but we loved serving. And so I understand in your all's church here that you have so many of you are wonderful to serve, and that's a great training for your children. So important that your children catch your love for the Lord. It's not because you're getting paid to do it; it's because you love the Lord. And I think that makes a big difference in children's lives, and it helps them as they grow as well.
Very good. Yes, sir.
As a spiritual leader of the house, if you're going off in a direction that maybe your wife doesn't agree with or doesn't understand, how do you approach that?
Wow, that one hits home, because we grew up in the church. My dad helped start the church back in the 40s, 50s, early 50s, and then that's the church that she had always been in. And so when we began dating, naturally, that's where I went to church. Even though Dad was preaching elsewhere, then I went to Bradley Church. And then that's where we got married. That's where we attended. That's where we taught class, sang in the choir, went out on soul winning, worked buses, and we did all of that at that church. And so when we were called to preach, then we always thought we would be at that church in some fashion. And then a church just a couple miles away invited us to come and to interview, that they wanted to consider us as pastor. And that was a tough move. That was a tough move on Marcia and the kids especially. And, after the first couple of weeks, then on the way home, and they're crying in the back seat. They missed their church.
Stacy's saying, "Please, can we go back to our old church?"
But anyway, we would pray about it and say, this is where the Lord has us. And it's not to say we won't go back to the other church at some point, but this is where the Lord has us. And it was the greatest decision probably that we'd ever made as far as ministry is concerned. And because chances are Scott wouldn't have gone to Crown College, Stacy wouldn't have gone to Crown College, they wouldn't have met their mates that they have. It's an amazing thing that the decisions you make today determine not only who you are tomorrow, but who your children are. And so it's so important to know that's God's will when you're making a move. And we have seen it over the years where a promotion comes up for a family, and they dart and want to do it, and well, have you really prayed about this, and have you considered all of these things? And many times it didn't end well, especially you pray about everything for sure, and worry about nothing, and just casting all of your care upon Him and knowing that He cares for us.
I think if a couple if our relationship is what it needs to be, then as a wife, we're going to be willing to follow that lead because he is the head of the home. And so we need to be willing to die to self and say, if this is what God is directing you to do, then let's do it. Somebody in the back, yes.
I have a question about the stage of life when your children are becoming adults. We have two teenage boys, one's about to be a junior. They'll go off, but they'll be coming back in that transition of how do you still be their parents and guide them, but they're now 18 and becoming their own adults and not on their own yet. Any advice for us on that?
You want to go first?
Yeah, it's interesting when they go off to college or if they're whatever, and they come back home, you see a difference. You do see a difference in them because they're becoming that grown up, I mean, and so I think when you get to a certain stage in life with your children, for us, we had to learn when to back off and when we had to let them make their decisions. And fortunately, if your children know that you love them, they will allow you to be a part of a lot of their decision making. And they will come to you and ask for your opinion about things. And it doesn't mean they're always going to take it. And we often laughed when um, we got married, and then after our kids grew up, and we often said, I wonder how many times that my mom and dad, who lived there close, how many times behind closed doors they said, what in the world are they thinking? I mean, they had to have, because there have been times for us that we've scratched our head and said, but one valuable thing that I will say that I learned from my parents, and again, they were not in ministry, but they were saved people, that when we moved out in the country, very close to, and built our home out there, very close to my parents, when on the farm when Scott was a year old, that mom and dad never interfered in our life. They never gave us their opinion unless we asked for it. And that was such wisdom, such wisdom. When the grandkids came along, it was whatever our rules were at home, that was the same rules at Grandma and Grandpa's. Now they got extra cookies and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, the important things, it was the same rules. And so I often said to him, if the Lord allows us to, live and be grandparents, I want to remember some of this. I want to be what they have allowed us to be with them. And so a lot of it is just, and every child is different. You said you have 3. They're all different. They all have different needs. There may be one that's needier, that needs more than the other one. Some are very independent and some think they know it all. And so we've all experienced that, So I think you just have to, little by little, take your hands off of them, but still be willing to give guidance. And the most important thing you can do during this transition period is pray for them diligently.
I think the only thing that I would add to that is thinking about Scott and Stacy, 4 years difference, that we prayed with them often, and then as they were growing up, then we were praying, but as they were making decisions, then we wanted them to pray with us, and let's pray and seek God's face on this and ask God's guidance. It's an amazing thing. I've said earlier, to hear your wife pray as husband and calling out to the Lord and asking for guidance, but also to hear your children to pray and asking God for direction. And that's it, is are they in the will of God? It may not be anything wrong with where they're going to go to school, let's say, or the job that they're going to take, or the car they're going to buy, but pray about everything, worry about nothing. And I think that's the philosophy, and just trust the Lord. In all thy ways, acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy path. Yeah.
Is there anything that you found, especially in like helping couples in crisis? I know you said you did do that couple with them.
Yes, in crisis, be it a marital problem or death or sickness or whatever. I think the big one there is the relationship with the husband and wife is to sit down and pray with them and counsel them. And they've got to want that, but to let them know, make yourself available. But seek guidance from Pastor and his wife. And Marcia and I met with a lot of couples. Very seldom did I meet with them by myself. Most of the time it was Marcia and I together. I think that was good. And there were times when there were things going on between the husband and wife, and they were both going two different directions and coming apart. That Marcia would meet with the wife, and I would meet with the husband, and then we'd compare notes, and then we'd meet with them together, and that kind of thing. I think it's good. First of all, for husband and wife, if I could give just one thing, and just one couple got it, that is most important, is to pray together as husband and wife, and to not miss that opportunity to pray together, and to hear your wife's heart, gentlemen, to hear your wife pray. And even now, when my wife prays for me, there's something there that it's just hard to explain. But praying for each other. I remember they sang a song, am I right, at our wedding? Each for the other and both for the Lord. Was that it? I got it. So, and that's been 52 years ago. But each for the other and both for the Lord. And I think that's where it begins. Just leaning on the Lord. Knowing that we don't have the answers. And even as we sit here, well, I can look across this room and see couples that have been married probably longer than us, that you probably have the answer, a better answer. But God's been good to us, and we thank the Lord for what he's doing in our life and our children's life, and now to see our grandchildren serving the Lord, and two grandsons that have answered call to preach, our one granddaughter married a preacher, and it's just like, wow, the Lord's just so good. He really is so good. And but it's not about just ministry. It's just about being faithful to the Lord. And that's all we wanted to be. We just, whatever the Lord wants, we're going to be faithful to the Lord.
I think for those that are not in ministry, if you're lay people in the church, we always, and we were there, before he answered the call to preach, we always made sure that we never tried to overstep the pastor and his wife's role. We always made sure that we communicated with our pastor about areas that he would want us to help them with. But when you have friends, you have family, that you're going through crisis, and you're going through it with them. You truly are. And so you just need to, as he said, ask the Lord to help you. And then just, but a lot of times you can get guidance. You can get guidance from someone who's already been there, somebody who's already gone through something like that.
The only other thing that came to my mind, I just add it, and wherever it fits, the Lord knows. I think it's important that your children know that you support the church, you support Pastor and his wife in the decisions that they make. And even though there may be something you disagree with, and when you get in the car and drive it home from church, and you say, well, why did he do that? That's so silly. Then I want you to know that the kids hear that. And if you want your children to stay in church, and you want them to be faithful to the Lord and supportive of the pastor, then there shouldn't be a question mark there about, well, he made a silly decision because mom and dad said so. What other decisions is he making or leading us? And so as a preacher's kid, then I saw that firsthand, and I felt in my heart, I'll never be a preacher. That's something not me. Well, never say never, because at 33, then wow, it's like this is your turn. But the Lord has helped us, and I thank the Lord for it and for what God is doing in our lives even now. But there are so many things that I could tell you that if I had it to do over, I would make some adjustments. I would do some things a little bit different. But the older people in this room, you know that you don't get a mulligan. And so you just take it as it comes, and you learn from your mistakes of yesterday and move forward.
I think in the time period, and Roger mentioned it in the previous session about communication, and about the crisis that we went through with a former pastor that was our pastor. And we went through that. And honestly, that was a lot worse than death. It really was. And so to have gone through that, and our children are at home, our children are still there. And so we had to be so cautious that we guarded our emotions and our feelings and our expressions, and they had to see that, you know, we love this man and his wife. We love them, and we're going to do everything that we can to help them, you know. And so I think if you when you go through the crisis, you have to think beyond you. You have to think about those around you that you're affecting, and most importantly, your children. And hopefully that helps.
Very good. Yes, sir.
When dealing with a difficult child, how do you keep that from becoming a strain on the marriage?
Boy, that's a tough one. There's no question about it. And when you say difficult, it could be a lot of different areas that you're talking about. Rebellion is a big one right at the top. There's no question about it. And how would we deal with that? Is that what you're asking? Or
Just in
How should
general,
you deal with
keep
it?
something like that situation from straining the marriage relationship.
right? Okay, very good.
Typically not blame the other partner because, you know, you saw your son do something, he did completely does the opposite.
Oh yeah,
And then you look at the other one, you're like, well, what did that for?
yeah.
And then you end up having.
Right, and the devil wants to jump in the middle of that and divide the two of you, and there's no question about it. And so, regardless of what stage of rebellion, the choices that they're making may not be what you want them to do. And again, mom may have one idea, dad has another idea of what should happen there. So first of all, I think you need to be on the same page. You have to be on the same page, and more is caught than taught, and they need to know that they can't play one against the other. And we've seen that so many times.
We saw that with our own children when they were little. We really did, where they would.
They had Martin in them. That's what they had.
But they were Paulies. But it was true at a young age. You know, that human nature is there. And so, you know, at a young age, why they would ask mommy something, and if they didn't get the answer that they wanted, then they go to daddy. You know, so it starts young.
That's
You
right.
know, it's not anything that we haven't all experienced if we've had children.
And you know you've got this situation when you come home, and of course, at this time I'm working out of town 3 days a week, and the schedule's crazy, church and all of that is coming. That was even before answering call to preach or to pastor, but we were still involved and teaching Sunday school class and all of that. And I would come home and Marsh or call. That was before cell phones. I'd call home, and as soon as she'd pick up the phone, I knew something was wrong. You understand what I'm talking about? I knew something was wrong. And to solidify that, she said, "You need to talk to your son." So, you know, you hit the door after being out for 3 days, and you're tired, and you're glad to be home. You want a hug and a kiss and a little smooching, and you need to talk to your son. And when Scott heard his full name, Christopher Scott Pauley, he knew he was in trouble. And oftentimes he would say, I don't understand, Dad. All I did was, and so I would hear him out and sit down and talk to him and individually. And then oftentimes Marcia would join to say, well, here's what happened. But I think every family goes through it where your children are developing, they're growing up, and they want that independence. It's coming out. It's coming out. And so it started at a young age for him. And so you just have to address it and discipline accordingly. It doesn't necessarily mean the belt or spanking, but it could be, privileges that's taken away or whatever, but or just a good talk with mom and dad. And we've referred to this some, I think. I'm not sure which session, maybe it was last week, but anyway, they all run together after a while. But I remember the first time that I had to spank Scott, and I went off like a rocket. And because that's where I grew up, I tell them I was raised very patriotic, and I crossed some line with my dad. It was stars and stripes forever, But and Dad didn't think anything about it, and then he went about his business, and man alive, and it was a mess. But so the first time I disciplined, that's what I did, and he went to his room and cried, and I went to my room and cried, and I told Marcia, I said, I can't do this. I just can't do this. I'm not going to do this like this. There's got to be a better way. And the Lord helped us. The Lord helped us. And as I said here, I mean, this goes back how many years? Scott's 48 years old. And go back when he was 4 years old. And I'm wearing him out. And he goes to his room and cry. I go to my room and cry. And from that day forward, then God just helped us. Before we discipline, we pray. And that's it. Casting all of your care upon him, for he careth for you. And so I remember that first time, and that he had crossed some line, and so I said, okay, you know what needs to happen? Yes, sir. And I was like, okay, well, let's come here to the couch. And of course, he comes to the couch and bends over, And I said, no, we're going to pray first. Oh, okay, Daddy. So I pray. No, I had him to pray first. I said, okay, Scott, you pray first. Okay, Daddy. Well, have you ever heard your children just crying out to the Lord and, asking for forgiveness and mercy, at this point? I mean, he's crying out, and because he knows the stars and stripes are about to come. But I want you to know, I mean, I feel it right now sitting here. When you hear your children pray, I mean, there's something strong, isn't it? You know what I'm talking about. And so when he prayed, by the time he prayed, then I'm in tears and I'm praying and asking God to help us, give us wisdom. And then just sit down and talk about where it's at. Bring Mom in and say, okay, what did you say to you, Mom? Why did you do that? Did Mom tell you? And get that one crossed off, and then just move forward. And so if I could give any advice, if you hear nothing else this whole weekend about raising children, I want you to know we don't have perfect children, and we're not perfect parents, but we serve a perfect God, and God's able to help us. And through that prayer, that changed the way we disciplined in our home with our daughter 4 years later, and with Scott, and God helped with that.
And Scott was the easy one. Stacy was our little spitfire. She was the one.
Scott looks like he's daddy, but he has his mother's personality. And Stacy looks like her mother, but she has her daddy's.
The female version of her daddy. So there was never a dull moment, and so every child's different, and you have to be careful that you don't compare children. You really do, because if you're not careful, well, this one was easy and this one was good, and but God made them all individual on purpose. No mistakes.
Is that good? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I listened to your son on his podcast, and I'm trying to secretly think of like who he sounds
Wow, that's a good question. I never thought about it happening and never thought about me being a preacher, or I didn't answer call to preach until late in life. But when he answered the call to preach, we knew early on that God had his hand upon our son. And we knew that God was dealing with him and something was different there. And the first message that I heard him preach was it a youth, was it 12 at a youth rally? No, it was at the cottage prayer meeting first. He spoke at a cottage prayer meeting in a home. I don't know if you do any of that, if you've done any of those kind of things, but where you go to an elderly's home and take a group of people and sing. And then so we had asked Scott to preach in the Logan's house, Clyde and Marie Logan. Wow, how did that come to me? And he was 12, going on 13, and he preached. And of course, what happened there, they're just loving on him, and he's the greatest thing since Billy Sunday, and he's going to be another Billy Sunday, and the list goes on. And he did well, and we just had to temper some of that. And then I remember one time then he and I were going out, and he was going to preach, and I was just taking him. It's pretty interesting when he can't even drive, and so I'm taking him to a meeting, and he does the meeting, and the people responded well, and so he's a teenager now, 13 years old, maybe 14, and we get in the car, and the first thing he asked was, "Well, how'd I do, Dad?" And I said to him, the thought was good, but you talk way too much about yourself. You don't talk about yourself. You lift up the Lord. And so it hurt him. It stung him big. But I wasn't trying to be mean or unkind, but just simply, ministry is not about lifting up oneself, but it's about lifting up the Lord Jesus Christ. You're just the messenger. And so he learned that, and he shares that even to this day. He went off to Bible college and served there on staff for a number of years, and now in full-time evangelism. And we just thank the Lord for what God's doing in his life. And now we have his son and our daughter's son have both answered call to preach. And we realize that the devil, he's your adversary, and he walketh about seeking whom he may devour. And whether you're coming from a preacher's home, a preacher's family, the devil's always on attack. And so we just ask that you pray for our family, pray for our children, and your pastor and his dear wife. And we know their family, and thank the Lord for the heritage that you have. And we have an opportunity to pass that on. Wow, I'm preaching now. I don't know where I'm at. All right. Did I answer your question, though? Okay.
I think
Clarify again.
think one thing that we did early on, and my husband said this to me, and it was like, okay, it was one of those areas that you say, okay, I'll follow you, because he said to me, he said, we want Scott to know that we want him in the center of God's will, but we're not going to encourage him really about preaching, because if we can discourage him, God didn't call him. And so that was one area that I was like, okay, I'll follow. And I did. And he was so right. He was so right, because it has to be a God-given call, and not just because somebody pat you on the back and said you did a good job. So anyway, that was a lesson that this mama learned.
Wow.
One more question, and sure has one more, and we'll finish out. If not, we can go to lunch.
I guess that's the next question. What are we eating?
I can't pronounce. It's fancy food. Let's thank the Pauleys. Thank you. We appreciate that. You guys can go on head back to your seat. Thank you. That was so helpful there. Thank you for all the good questions and wonderful answers. A lot could be learned, and maybe your question was asked by somebody else, and that gave you the answer you needed, or there's still time in between the sessions here. You can talk to them. They'll be with us tomorrow, God willing, for our Family Sunday, and spending some time with them tomorrow, and then they'll be leaving to head home on Monday, and they get a week off. I just learned, so that's exciting. We'll go across the way. I'll give a couple instructions, and then we'll pray for the food over there. So I think we're ready to go. Maybe can you just check just to make sure? They said 3 minutes about 2 minutes ago, so I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. As you go in, appreciate the Hamiltons. Thank you guys for all you did with decorations. It looks wonderful in there. You know, I get grand ideas. I'm like, big picture. Let's have a marriage seminar. This will be amazing. And okay, it's fine. I'm just going to talk for a little bit. So I'm stalling. But I get these grand ideas, just broad stroke. Let's have this. And then the reality sets in. Okay, what are we doing for food and decorations and special speakers and and all this stuff? Oh yeah, we need to decide all those things. And so it came in a hurry. But I appreciate all those that jumped in, helped last minute purchasing and decorating and all that was done there. And Melanie, thanks for the efforts with the designs. This theme, I taught on it Sunday morning in Sunday school, and I never connected Esther with Ephesians. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 33 talks about love and reverence, and it was touched on last night, and how the husband is the initiator to express love, and then the response is the respect, and it's the cycle. As there's love, then there's respect, and you can look at it sometime on your own, study that example there in Esther, and how King Ahasuerus, it was obvious he loved Esther above all, and because he loved her, she respected him in the way that she acted, in the way that she spoke. And the king and the queen, just a great example for us. And I said this statement on Sunday, is not original with me. If you want your wife to treat you like a king, then you must treat her like a queen. And this king, King Ahasuerus, he learned that. And he had a lot on his plate, a lot of responsibilities, a vast kingdom. And yet when his queen came uninvited, it was against the law to do that. But when she came with a heavy heart because of her situation, he put everything aside and said, okay, you're my queen, and what's important to you is important to me. And he dropped everything to care for her. And that's a great example for us. So anyways, it was a great theme. Appreciate those that helped to translate that into the decorations and different things that we did, designs. All right, so when you go into the fellowship hall, if you're going this way, watch your step going down. The tables on this side, there's 4 and 4, and then 6 at each table. I know the vases are a little bit shaky. Maybe did we get those secured, or they're still a little bit shaky? So just be careful sitting down, or you may get flowers in your lap. All right, but it's beautiful in there. They're just a little bit shaky on this side. But we'll sit there. We'll pray for the food, and then I think we want to give out those. We're going to give out that gift, those tracts, maybe while we're together over there. And then we'll do one last session after lunch, and we have plenty of time. But we'll have the ladies come back in here for the final session. Men will stay there. We'll have to do a little cleanup, but we'll just stay at the tables. Understand it was a little tight in the ladies split session, and as men, we need some man space, and so we're not going to be able to do that. So we're just going to stay at the tables and have our men's session there after lunch. So let's do that. So let's head across the hall. We'll pray for the food once we get over there.